Podcast City Network.
Listener discretion is advised.
You're listening to The Everett Lee Show. A shot of entertainment to the head. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the entertainment.
What's happening, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to the Everett Lee Show podcast. I'm Everett Lee. Quick shout out to all my followers on Twitter. You could follow me at the Everett_Lee, Facebook.com/Everett Lee. Click that thumbs up. And of course, Podcast City Network, the official host of the Everett Lee Show. Have a pretty good program lined up for you today here. Those tuning in on Twitch right now as I speak. And I want to give a shout out to supporters of Podcast City Network. You can find this and much, much more over on podcastcity.net. If you want a Podcast City Network t-shirt, head over to Sport Sanity Customs. They'll hook you up with a Podcast City t-shirt. So head over to Sport Sanity Customs over on the sponsor tab on podcastcity.net. Atlantic Sound Records. If you're looking at vinyl or CD and cassette that you may have lost, be sure to head over to Atlantic Sound Records on International Boulevard in Daytona Beach. Hit them up on Facebook, Atlantic Sound Records. City Limits Taproom in DeLand, Florida, home of Draft Day, an official host of Podcast City Network. Head over to City Limits Taproom for fresh brew on tap, food menu. The grilled cheese is excellent. And indoor and outdoor seating with indoor and outdoor television, stage events in the back, which much, much more from City Limits Tap Room. If you're looking to book that destination and get away from it all, hit up Telltale Travel on the sponsor tab on podcastcity.net. Brittany Emler will hook you up with that destination and get away from it all. And this, of course, is all brought to you by podcastcity.net, the official host of the Everett Lee Show. Joining me on the program today is none other than a good friend of Robin Nilsson from Wrestle Popcast. And my guest is the owner of Demoblast Studios. You may have seen some of his work, or a lot of his work actually, in the indie wrestling scene. I want to welcome to the program today David Stockwell. How you doing, David?
Everett, I'm doing great, man. I appreciate you having me on the program. Listening to you go through your different sponsors, it takes me back to my radio days of doing live reads, man. So very cool. Definitely happy to be here, my friend.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that, man. I definitely do appreciate that. You live up in Ohio. How's the weather up there? Is it cold?
It's a little cool. You know, originally, Everett, I'm from upstate New York, but right now I live in the Cincinnati, Ohio area, and it's a little cooler here, but compared to my my days in New York, it's pretty tame. So not so bad.
That's pretty awesome, man. What brought you from New York to Ohio? Can you tell me about that?
I sure can. I'll try to give you the Campbell Soup condensed version, but essentially I went from New York to Las Vegas, Nevada, and then to Cincinnati, which has been quite the journey, to say the very least. But when I was in New York, I did radio, and I first started my own journey into the wrestling business. I started training at a small spot in Schenectady, New York, called World of Hurt Wrestling. That is no longer in existence now, but I started pro wrestling training about 18 years ago, and doing that a little bit, and then doing radio. Eventually, I got tired in New York. I had some friends that I met there that had moved to Las Vegas. I never saw myself living there, but eventually in 2003, I decided that I needed a change, so I completely changed situations and went from upstate New York to Las Vegas, Nevada, which was a pretty big culture shock. Took me a little bit to adjust, but after a while, I kind of got my bearings. And when I was in Las Vegas, I knew that I wanted to continue my journey into pro wrestling. At that point, there wasn't much of a wrestling scene out there. Now it's a little more thriving, but at that point, it really wasn't.
Right.
And around 2005, I was looking at potentially moving, and I was looking at different wrestling schools that I wanted to continue my wrestling education. The two places that I was contemplating was California. I was debating going and training with Rick Bassman, who, for wrestling historians, Rick Bassman's the one that primarily is responsible for discovering Sting and the Ultimate Warrior.
Nice.
His Ultimate Pro Wrestling promotion also saw guys train there like Samoa Joe and John Cena. So I'd gone and I took a tour out to California. Took a look at, he had two facilities at this point in 2005. He had a training facility in El Segundo, which is famous for being the home of Hot Wheels. And then he had another training facility in San Clemente, which was a beautiful facility. He had, at that point, Rick Bassman also owned a MMA promotion called Valor. So the facility in San Clemente was like a hybrid MMA/pro wrestling training facility. So it was pretty cool. But in addition to California, I also was looking into Cincinnati and the HWA when it was still in existence as another possible training facility. I would have loved to have gone to California, Everett, but the cost of living
It's pretty
was
high, ain't it?
ridiculous. If I had moved out there, I was making a pretty good income living in Las Vegas. For me to be able to duplicate that, I would have to duplicate that lifestyle that I was living in Las Vegas. And I don't want to have any type of misconception. It's not like I was, eating caviar and riding in limousines every day, but
Right.
I was living comfortably. For me to duplicate that in California, I would have had to have made nearly double the income that I was making previously. So I decided to turn my attention to Cincinnati. The gal that I was with at that point in time had family here, so it just kind of made sense. So we packed up and moved out here in 2006. I did begin very briefly training with HWA. Unfortunately, I allowed life to get in the way, my friend. So the gal that I moved out here with and I split, unfortunately, pretty quickly after we moved out here.
Right.
It kind of derailed me. I got away from training and really put that whole wrestling dream on the back burner for several years.
Right.
Up until a handful of years ago, where I started Demoblast Studios and started to pursue. I was doing some podcasting myself. I was doing some wrestling-themed artwork, and then a handful of years ago, I started to, as I was attending matches, just brought my camera along and just for fun, just started taking photos from the stands. And when I took those photos, I started to edit them and post them like I was professional, with the thought moving forward that, okay, if I get this to a point where, people take notice, perhaps I can turn this into an opportunity to be able to photograph events ringside and perhaps even make, a little money in the process. And
Right.
And after some time, that's exactly what happened. And it's just kind of grown from there.
That's quite a bit right there, man. That's pretty amazing. You starting out in New York and then just going all over, and then California. I have to agree, and a lot of people I've talked to that live out in California and has been there, they've basically said, like the cost of living is ridiculous out there, man. It's like you got to basically, you have to have a good income and be able to support yourself to live out in the state of California because of the cost of living so high out there. Ridiculous though, but Ohio is great. I spent about 5 years in Ohio, actually. You ever heard of a small town called Cambridge?
Where is that close to? I know it sounds familiar.
It's about an hour east of Columbus and 2 hours south of Cleveland and about an hour south of Akron. It's right there at the intersection of, I believe, 70 and 77. It's like right smack, like right there in that intersection right there. And it's a small town. I actually spent about 5 years there. I finished high school. I moved there when I was like 16. It was a culture shock being from Daytona, growing up in Daytona Beach, and then moving to Cambridge, Ohio, out in the sticks, out in the middle of nowhere, after seeing beach and water and everything about my whole life, and then seeing snow for the first time. But I made up for that, man. I mean, I enjoyed myself during the winter. I got myself a cheap snowboard and had a lot of hills. I was out there on 10 anchors. Okay. Yeah, pretty much killed the time during the winter up there in Ohio and made some friends. Finished high school up there, graduated high school up there. And then around 99, almost early 2000, it was around my 21st birthday, I left. I went to Tennessee. I ended up spending about 11 years in Tennessee to live with my father, and those are the best 11 years of my life there. I made some really good friends, developed some really good friendship, got to know more of my father's side of the family, a little bit here and there. Got to, hang out with my crazy cousin and his best friend who became like a brother to me. So I know what you mean by definitely like moving around and settling in and, just making a place your home.
Absolutely, man. I mean, with Ohio, Everett, I'd be lying if I said that when I first moved here that I enjoyed it, because it took me quite a while
to get used
to get adjusted and to start enjoying my time here. Because when I first moved here, aside from again, the relationship I was in that very quickly disintegrated, I didn't know anybody here. This was completely new territory for me. At least when I moved from New York to Vegas, I had at least a handful of people there that I knew. But moving to Cincinnati, I didn't know anybody. So for the longest time, like I would keep saying to myself, as soon as I'm financially stable, I'm getting the hell out of here. But I as time went on, my perception of the area changed, and at this point, I enjoyed it. It's comfortable. It's something that has become definitely my home now, and one of the biggest advantages, personally, that I believe living in this area is that it's kind of centralized. So, if you want to go to Cleveland or Chicago, or you mentioned living in Tennessee, I've enjoyed visiting Nashville from time to time. All those areas are, accessible within a day. A 4, 5, 6 hour drive, and you are, completely someplace different. When I lived in New York, and especially when I lived in Las Vegas, if you wanted to go outside of that area, you would be driving for an extremely long time. So it's really nice to have that centralized location. And, even though the early years being here were definitely a struggle, I can only imagine for you, for me going from having New York in my past to coming here, it wasn't so bad. For you coming from the majority of your life being in Florida and then coming here,
yeah,
that's a pretty huge change. But
that is.
But as time has gone on, I've had developed some great friendships. My gal Becky and I have been together now for almost 6 years now. So if I hadn't stayed, I would have never met her, and I would consider that a huge loss. And of course, you opened up the show by talking about our mutual friend Robin Nelson. Another great friend. Enjoyed getting to know. He and I actually met when he interviewed me for his podcast, Wrestle Podcast, and we just kind of hit it off.
Oh, really?
And we developed a good friendship. Absolutely. And it's interesting, Everett, because after we did our interview, I had a few people that I know approach me and go, have you guys known each other for a long time? And my response has always been no. I mean, we talked
right
for probably about 5 minutes before we started the broadcast, and then we went on the air, and we just kind of hit it off. So Robin's a good dude.
He is.
He's got that unique, intangible quality. I've talked to him about this before. I don't know what it is about him, but just people gravitate towards him.
Yeah, they do.
We went absolutely. We went to the NWA 70th anniversary show, and he had told me that before the show, he had been communicating with Hollywood from the original Glow series.
Yes.
And he said that she wanted to meet up with him before the show. Now, if I didn't know Robin, I would think that he was giving me a line of BS.
Right.
But we got there. She's communicating with him. We went to the building earlier. She went out of her way to come talk to him a handful of times before the show. Right. Big smiles, big hugs. It's pretty crazy, but Robin's a good dude, and I'm definitely happy for him, his success, and how well the show Wrestle Podcast is doing as well.
Oh yeah, he's basically killing it here on Podcasting Network every week. There's some weeks where I'm burning the candle at both ends for him, man, because one day he'll put out an episode, Wrestle Podcast. I'm like, okay, cool, and then later that day, another episode of Wrestle Podcast. I'm like, man, it's like he didn't even let this one settle in yet. And then all of a sudden, he comes out with, boom, out of left field, Paranormal Podcast. I'm like, in like 3 days. Actually, we'll say I'm exaggerating here, Robin. 2 days. It's like 3 episodes of Wrestle Podcast and we'll say exaggeration, 2 more, almost 3 episodes of Paranormal. I'm like, damn, man, I'm sitting there, updating, trying to update the website, trying to keep up and trying to get that content out there as quick as he's shoving it out there, man. If I was making records, man, I would be SOL. I'd be shit out of luck for the fact that he's putting out so much content, man. I mean,
he's definitely a machine when it comes to doing the interviews. He definitely is under the if Robin had a business model, it would be he wants to put out steady content all the time, and God bless him. I wish that I had more time to be able to do as much as he does, because he's constantly putting stuff out there. He's constantly updating his Facebook page.
Yes.
He definitely has put the time in, and I know he just traveled this past Saturday to go talk to J.J. McGuire, the gentleman that has worked with Jimmy Hart on many of the wrestling entrance themes. I know he was also a member of the Gentrys. With Jimmy Hart, and did a nice little video interview with him. So, Robin's out there, man. I'm glad that he's doing well and giving you some great content there for Podcast City Network.
Yeah, he is. He's definitely killing it, like every week, putting out the content and stuff. And I love the fact that that it was through him, and I even thanked him after last week, or actually 2 weeks ago. I had JJ McGuire on myself. After I got done talking with JJ, I reached out to Rob, and I thanked him for that, man, because it was so great, being able to have a guest on like that, and the connections that Robin has made in the world of, wrestling. Did you go to StarCast with him?
Yeah, so Robin and I were at StarCast. We met a ton of people there, made some great contacts. Sometimes, Everett, when it comes down to attending certain events, it transcends just being a fan, especially when you have a podcast or you have a production company like I have with Demoblast Studios. It's important to put yourself out there, to be seen and known, to make those further contacts, to grow your business. To get visibility for your brand out there. So going to something like StarCast was not only a lot of fun as a fan, it was a ton of fun, but it also was awesome for networking and getting some great social media content. And, you mentioned just a few moments ago about Robin helping to recommend that JJ do your show. I mean, in a lot of ways, Robin gets it. And I hope more folks get it. And what I mean by that is that, all of us that are creators that don't have massive budgets. I actually just made a post on this on my Instagram account. Pretty much everything social media-wise for me is Demoblast Studios, whether it be Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc. It's all Demoblast Studios. So on my Instagram account, I made a post about this recently about, when you are a creator and you don't have a large budget or a large company supporting you, it's important to make sure that you are not just promoting your own stuff, but also helping to promote, your fellow creators as well. Mm-hmm. Because, that joint visibility, that helping each other out, that giving attention to, the Everett Lee Show or, the Wrestle Podcast or any other number of shows out there, it's important to spread the wealth and to spread the kindness because it'll be returned to you tenfold. I think that sometimes people get so, self-absorbed that they only think about themselves, and in reality, they're short-sighted in their business approach. Of marketing and just being a decent human being, man. I mean, outside of, wanting to spread the word about your brand and your, what you're trying to promote, just being a decent human being and being a good friend, man. I mean, one of my best friends in the wrestling business is, and I shouldn't just say in the wrestling business, one of my best friends, period, is former Smoky Mountain Wrestling heavyweight champion Bobby Blaze Smedley. Bobby's been one of my best friends, period. He's helped to not only be a great friend to me personally, but he's helped to get the word out there about myself and my brand, on a very consistent basis. And in return, I try to show him support as well. He's got a great podcast called Bell to Bell with Bobby Blaze that, I definitely encourage anyone out there that's checking out the program today to listen to. It's a great program. But it's that joint promotion, supporting each other, giving each other help, giving each other a helping hand. That's going to help not just a singular individual get ahead. It's going to help all of us as a creative community get ahead. Pro wrestling is very much a niche market. There's no question about it. And there's definitely a vast audience. But in saying that, there's so many different options out there that people can check out or spend their time doing that sometimes getting people to take notice can be difficult. So trying to go it alone is damn near impossible.
It is.
But with what you're doing, Everett, with the Podcast City Network, I mean, that in and of itself is a huge help to to Robin, to I know David Russell, it benefits from it as well. I mean, it's definitely helping the wrestling community, the podcast wrestling community, and that's very cool that you're doing that.
I appreciate that. We try to do what we can and try to get content out there and try to get people that may have not heard or have heard, like in the wrestling indie scene. They may have went to a show and seen a wrestler that stuck out to them, and they'd go home and probably search for them on their PC or on their phone right there, actually, and then just find information on that wrestler, and then come upon an interview with interviews, and it's like, okay, going through, and then what would stick out? Podcast City Network, maybe Russell Podcast, Everett Lee Show, Deathmatch Russell. I love that by talking with people and hearing their story and how they got to where they are today from a starting point to where they're at. And I love talking to people that have that, and especially with wrestling. I mean, wrestling, I've been a fan of wrestling since I was a kid. I remember 5 years old watching Hulk Hogan, WrestleMania 3, body slam Andre the Giant, and I would have to say, as a kid, that was a Hulkamaniac, and I don't know who wasn't a Hulkamaniac as a kid. I mean, especially with the WrestleMania 3 story build-up with Hogan and Andre, man. What's some of your early memories of wrestling growing up as a kid?
Well, I first started watching wrestling, I'm going to assume I was probably 5 or 6. And for me, it was the beginning of wrestling was the old world-class championship wrestling out of Texas.
Yes.
If you follow Steve Austin's podcast, I know he's talked several times about really falling in love, watching world class, and really that rivalry between the Von Erichs and the Freebirds. And that was basically what got me hooked as well. I used to watch that program every Saturday at noon on the CBS affiliate in upstate New York, WRGB Channel 6. I later actually went to work for them for a brief period of time, which was pretty cool. Not world class, but WRGB,
right?
Just to make that clear. But at world class it started, and then I'm old enough to remember all the different wrestling magazines. I used to get all the after mags and the magazines that George Napolitano had, and through the wrestling magazines, I followed, Ric Flair and the NWA, just seeing pictures of the Road Warriors, hooked me without even ever seeing them wrestle. And then later on, some of my earliest wrestling memories are that world-class show, the Von Erichs Freebirds, the first WWF TV I ever watched. I distinctly remember the very first Piper's Pit.
Oh yeah, of course.
Which is, part of the reason why I love still to this day. I love and miss Roddy Piper. I was very thankful I had the opportunity to meet him on 2 different occasions, and
nice.
Just a super genuine guy who you saw on TV and who he was in real life. Pretty much the same guy. You might get a little more toned down in person, but Roddy was Roddy.
Right.
And that was the awesome thing about him. But Roddy Piper, and it was a little bit later, but what you just mentioned, the Hogan Andre WrestleMania 3. I mean, that's probably. I'm sure some people would debate it, but I think that's the most iconic WrestleMania moment that there's ever been. I don't think there's ever been a WrestleMania main event, especially that body slam, that's been any more iconic or memorable than that particular moment. Of course, that card also had that fantastic, Steamboat Savage match that so many people, including Chris Jericho, were inspired by. But no question about it, that Hogan slamming Andre was, I remember the regular news. The regular sports news in my area covered that. Which you never see that now, but back then occasionally they would, because it was that big of a deal and that many people cared and had their eyes on the product. But ever since that point, man, I've been hooked. It's whether you're a fan or you're a performer in the ring or whatever capacity, if you're behind the scenes, once you've gotten bit by the wrestling bug, Pretty much you're just like the NWO or the Bullet Club. You're in it for life.
Yep, you pretty much are, man. You pretty much. Yeah, Piper's Pit, man. I'll never forget that. Roddy Piper smashing Jimmy Snuka upside the head with a coconut.
Oh, no question, man. Thinking about, iconic moments in wrestling. I mean, that
was great.
Definitely. I mean,
that's great.
That epitomizes the chaos and the frenetic energy that Roddy had, man, for sure.
Yeah. I loved WrestleMania 2. Him and his feud with Mr. T. You remember when he showed up on the set of the A-Team, Mr. T? He showed up there, and he about ran him off. He wanted to kill him, man. And then I think after that, he had Mr. T come to one of the events there. I forget where it was at. And he was like, come on, sit down. He's like, here, I'll clean this off because I know how dirty you are on the chair. And it's just classic Piper, man.
Gosh.
I mean, he was
for sure.
So great.
that feud with Mr. T, man.
Yeah.
You know, with the time frame that I grew up, I was and still am a huge fan of the A-Team. So I love
the
Mr.
A-Team.
T. You know, earlier this year, I actually went to a convention where I got to meet Dwight Schultz, who played Murdoch from the A-Team.
How was that?
Unfortunately, I haven't got a chance to meet T yet, but maybe someday. But the rivalry with Mr. T was off the charts. I mean, they made their dislike for each other very well known. You know, the interesting thing about that is that the two of them, for years, kept up this whole situation of hating each other. And then when Roddy passed, and you could probably find it on YouTube. I know that's where I saw it, but I caught an interview with Mr. T where he talked about Roddy passing. And, you know, he had nothing but good things to say about Roddy. He basically said that, you know, they actually were friends and they got along, and they kind of hammed it up because they felt like they were going to actually do more together or work more together. So they kept that rivalry up for years. But if you didn't know that, you would swear that those guys hated each other's guts.
I have to agree with you right there, because they did one thing that I feel is really dead, and I don't know if you'd agree with me on this, that kayfabe. They kept it kayfabe, man, because people thought it was real.
Yes.
Just like, I don't know, I have the WWE Network, and I was watching Table 3, and I was watching the episode with Flair and Steamboat, and Steamboat mentioned something to Flair that Flair was like, I don't remember that, and he said, yeah, this is what happened, and he said, we did a show. After the show, you went to the convenience store. Well, I pull up and I go in a convenience store and I see you and you see me, and all these wrestling fans were there like, oh no, it's like, and then he said, we kept the kayfabe, and I walked up and I was like, he said I forgot what he actually said though, and then Flair was like, oh yeah, I remember that, man, because they you know, kayfabe is pretty much not around anymore.
Well, I mean, you know, I definitely agree with you that you know, in the day and age that we live in, maintaining kayfabe at all times is extremely difficult.
It is,
and as you know, anyone involved in the wrestling business, it's a very difficult line to walk between trying to keep certain things kayfabe and opening it up enough to where the fans feel like you're not trying to pull the wool over their eyes, or you're trying to include them in the situation. You're trying to share things. I mean, that's the whole appeal to shooting interviews or podcasting, is that you get to hear kind of the behind-the-scenes stories from so many of these performers. So it's a very fine line. But to your point, Everett, when it comes to especially rivalries, you know, I definitely think that guys could, you know, potentially do a better job at maintaining kayfabe. I mean, ultimately, we all know it's a work, but when you're in the building, when you're watching the show, you know, all of us want to be able to, you know, suspend, you know, our disbelief. We want to be able to, you know, get lost in the moment. The same way that when we go to a movie, you know, we want to be able to enjoy the movie. We want to get lost in the story. We want to be able to fully be immersed in that particular world that's been created on the screen. So wrestling is the same way. You know, when it's done right, it's a beautiful device to tell stories, to captivate the audience, that basically allow you to escape for a few hours. So if guys and gals are doing a good job at maintaining, you know, who they are as a performer, and if they're having some type of a major rivalry with somebody, if they're able to maintain that in the eyes of the audience, it just enhances the experience that much more. But, you know, just to give an example, I don't want to name any names because I certainly don't want to bury anybody, because I have respect for the gentlemen as performers that I saw this happen with. But I was photographing an event earlier this year, and the two individuals that were involved in the main event were a part of one of the bigger rivalries of this year. And, you know, they, you know, had a pretty, extreme physical, violent match.
Mm-hmm.
Later that night, as we're leaving the building and et cetera, the two guys who were involved in the main event, again, a part of this major rivalry, ended up leaving the building together. I'm sure they probably went out to eat together that night.
Right.
And when I see that, it's like I get it because, you're on the road, you got to travel, et cetera. But at the same time, to go back to what you were just saying about, Steamboat and Flair, being, seen together at a convenience store and somehow keeping kayfabe going at that point in time, it just seems like certain measures could be taken a little more carefully. Like, hey, even if you're riding together, you go out and I'll be out there in 5 or 10 minutes, just so you're not seen together.
Right.
Just simple things like that. And maybe I'm too old school in my thought process because, again, when you're on the road a lot, I get it. I haven't been on the road a fraction of the time that most guys and gals working in the business have. So I understand there's a lot of travel. You're away from home. It's difficult enough. It's difficult enough to perform in the ring and the physicality involved, period. But then to add on the travel in the cars and et cetera, time away from home, staying someplace different every night, I can understand wanting to make that process as comfortable and as simple as possible. But I do still think that kayfabe can still be effective, and if it's done right, to a degree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely can be. One current wrestler I'd have to say off the top of my head, which has kept it kayfabe, would be in NXT, would be Tommaso Ciampa. He's kept it. Didn't for a while. Didn't want no merchandise or anything, especially on social media, anything with him. He wanted to keep it kayfabe, and he pulled it off really well. I mean, now he's putting out there's merchandise with him, but he's did an excellent job doing that. And I'm sure, I can't think off the top of my head here or there, but a lot of independent wrestlers still try to keep it kayfabe, and that's cool. I love that because I definitely love that old school mentality of kayfabe, because like you said, nowadays you have social media, you have Facebook, you have Twitter, Instagram, and then you go to a show, you see a good guy, bad guy go at it, and then you go on social media, you go on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, and then you see on one of their profiles, you see a picture taken with who they just had a match with in the ring, and you're like, okay. But I'd have to say the curtain call. Remember the curtain call with Shawn Michaels, Triple H,
of course,
and Nash and Hall? That right there, to me, was the end of kayfabe because of the backlash with that. And from then on, and how times have evolved and changed, it still could be there. You could still do it, like I said, and I love that mentality, the old school mentality of kayfabe. I mean, for example, like you mentioned, like with the Von Erichs and the Freebirds. I mean, that was perfect right there. That rivalry right there. You kept up with the Attitude Era and with WWE, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, I've watched consistently for several years. I probably the only time that I stopped watching for a period of time ever was in the earlier part of the 90s. After the steroid scandal in WWF, business kind of tanked, and this was the time of Mantar and T.L. Hopper and those kind of characters, and just WWF and WCW, both of their programs were pretty bad. So during that period of time, there was a period where I just stopped watching for a while because I just couldn't take it. It was so bad that I just couldn't make myself watch it anymore. But outside of that period, I've always consistently watched. But I definitely watched it through the Attitude Era for sure.
Mm-hmm. There for a while, I quit watching, I think, after I stopped watching for actually a few years there. It was shortly right after the product, like when WWE went PG there for a while. I believe it was in 2008 up until late 2013. I didn't watch none of that. I didn't watch nothing. And I did eventually go back and watch some of the stuff because I did miss some good content and some good matches, especially like with CM Punk and John Cena. That storyline right there, I missed that. Mm-hmm. And I missed quite a bit of stuff like right there. And I did get back into it. And then, of course, the early 90s, I didn't really watch much. I had some friends that was really into it. I had one friend who was really into it. And I remember him getting all hyped up about Survivor Series with Hogan and Undertaker. And I kind of got back into it for just that brief moment because of that. And I'm like, Hogan, Taker? I was like, Hogan's going to beat him. He's going to take the belt. And then all of a sudden, I tell people, I said that, don't remember this, that when it came to that right there with Taker defeating Hogan at Survivor Series and capturing his first championship, to me, that was the shock of, when Lesnar broke the streak at WrestleMania 30. To me, that was a shock. It's like, what? Hogan got beat? Who is this guy, man? And, the history speaks for itself with The Undertaker. I mean, phenomenal career there. And I was happy, and I love the fact that I got to see that entrance in The Undertaker wrestle live after all these years watching him on TV back in 2015 when me and my wife went up to New York for the first time. My first time going up to New York and was there for 2015 for SummerSlam. And when Taker came out, it was like Paul Bearer said. I don't know if you've heard Paul Bearer say it when he's there in the ring, that when Taker's entrance, it gives him goosebumps. I'm telling you, man, that gave me goosebumps watching him come out to the ring.
Yeah, there's nothing like The Undertaker's entrance. I mean, I've been fortunate that I've seen, I was able to attend live events with Taker from pretty much the early to mid 90s onward. So, I remember him wrestling Ultimate Warrior at a house show in Glens Falls, New York.
Oh, nice.
And just going from there. And this was the very early days when he would still have the body bag that he would put opponents in, and then to see the progression of the entrance. I mean, there's nothing like The Undertaker's entrance in pro wrestling for sure. But that's a good point that you made as far as Hogan putting him over at Survivor Series, and then later Taker kind of returning the favor by putting over Brock Lesnar as well years later at Mania. Yeah. But that's definitely interesting. But I mean, those types of iconic moments are what truly stand out. And that time frame that you were just speaking about, which I'm guessing that was 91 or 92. That Survivor Series took place. WWF was still kind of running on the fumes of what they had built in the 80s, but it was, starting to burn out, and obviously Hogan was a little worn out and tired at that point. If you go back and watch footage, he was a little heavier than he normally would be. He just looked worn out.
He did. I agree.
He needed a break, and the company needed to change, and unfortunately with the steroid scandal, and then there was the sexual misconduct stuff that was going on as well at that point in time. And it created an environment where just they had to scale way back. And financially, actually, when we were just a few weeks ago, Robin and I went to Jason Maples' Heroes and Legends of Wrestling convention that he does in Fort Wayne, Indiana. We did a little interview with Oscar from Men on a Mission, and he was talking about how being on the road at that time when the New Generation guys were involved, that how slim it was financially for those guys, and how they tried to make the best of the situation. But the business was primed for a change. But speaking about, taking time away from watching WWE, that's the awesome thing about, modern day pro wrestling, is that as many people as there are that complain about the current WWE product, the awesome thing is that if you're not content watching WWE, and honestly, Everett, the only time that I watch WWE programming, I watch clips on YouTube. The last full show that I watched was WrestleMania this year. But outside of that, I don't really spend a lot of time watching their stuff. I mean, I keep track of what they do, because I don't think that you can really be involved in wrestling and not follow what the biggest company on the planet does. But from a content standpoint, if you're tired of WWE, there's so many different alternatives out there. I mean, it's amazing to me that there are so many people that are still behind the times when it comes to following something like New Japan Pro Wrestling, which has been around since the late 70s, an established company who has made some, it's arguably the best wrestlers on the planet are working for New Japan Pro Wrestling. Obviously, guys like Chris Jericho jumping over, and obviously their world champion Kenny Omega, one of the, if not the hottest wrestlers on the planet right now. That's a great alternative. Ring of Honor has always been an alternative.
Yes.
But there are so many others. Impact, Tried and True, the resurgence of the National Wrestling Alliance, PWG, Jakara, I mean, et cetera, et cetera. There's so many different companies, both big and small, out there for people to choose from. And, there's a ton of content to be found. I know there are different streaming services. I know Fight TV is one of them, where folks can subscribe and watch, endless amounts of content. So for people that are just disenfranchised with WWE right now, it doesn't necessarily mean like in past years, where if you got tired of something, you just stopped watching wrestling entirely. If you're tired of WWE, take a break from that, start giving some of these other companies an opportunity, because 9 times out of 10, you'll end up seeing stuff that athletically and just overall, even story-wise, will be much more compelling and much more satisfying for you as a viewer and a fan.
I totally agree with that. Back it's almost been about 2 years ago now. It was right around, almost 2 years ago to this. It was actually on this month here, 2 years ago in November. Fort Lauderdale Ring of Honor came to Fort Lauderdale, and there was buzz all over it online, and the match card. So me and my nephew, my wife, and a friend of his, we all went to Fort Lauderdale. That's the furthest. It's funny because that's the furthest South Florida I've ever been, was Fort Lauderdale. And so we hit the road. We got down there, and we were at one of the armories down there in Fort Lauderdale. It happened to be the same armory that Dusty Rhodes wrestled in. And that night, Cody Rhodes had a match, and I can't remember off the top of my head who he wrestled, though, but it was cool because about everyone in the Bullet Club was there. Me and my nephew went over to the merchandise table there, and we were sitting there talking, BS in there for a while with the Addiction, with Chris, Frankie
Daniels and Frankie Kazarian.
Yeah, we're sitting there just BSing with them, man. And I just bought 2 Bullet Club T-shirts. My wife killed me for it because of what I spent on it. But I was like, hey, I thought of you, baby. And so I ended up, I didn't have enough cash on me to get the comic book. And Christopher Daniel was like, come on, man, And I'm like, ugh. I'm like, damn, I'll have to go out into my car. I never did get it though, but it was cool. It was cool being able to sit there and just BS with him and stuff. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, where else in a wrestling promotion where do you have the talent hanging out at the merchandise table, selling merchandise, talking with fans, hanging out like they're one of them? And I was thinking to myself, I was like, I know one of the big companies wouldn't allow that. Then during one of the matches they had in the middle of the whole event, they broke real quick for intermission, and I think it was Marty Scurll. As soon as he got done, he got out of the ring, and then while the crowd was going back to concession stands and taking a restroom break and stuff, there he is walking along with everybody else, run into the restroom to go relieve himself, or went to the back or wherever, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, you wouldn't see that anyplace else, I was like, this is so great. I mean, I had one hell of a time. I'll never forget it. And my wife, she loved it. She's like, wow, it was like one of her like really first seeing something else besides WWE. I've taken her to see NXT live, and of course we've been to 2 WWE pay-per-views and a couple Monday Night Raws. But this right here was so great, and I'll tell you what topped it off at the end of the night. The Bullet Club, Cody, this back when he was still ROH World Champion. They did a thing with the Addiction, which was great. And after everything was done and over with, people were leaving. People were still hanging around the ring, the barricades there. Cody went around and took selfies, signed autographs all the way around the barricade until he made his way back to the back. And he made sure people got pictures and autographs. And I was like, that is such an amazing thing, and I have a different respect for Cody for doing something like that. It was just so fantastic.
I'm sure that's refreshing for him to be able to do stuff like that after working for WWE for so many years. I mean, he essentially broke in, with a WWE contract. I mean, he started off when OVW was a WWE developmental territory. I mean, he pretty much went from OVW straight to the main roster. So his, exposure to the indies didn't really come until after he parted ways with the E. So I'm sure there's a big part of him that enjoys doing stuff like that. But to your point, in regards to Ring of Honor, some of my personal favorite wrestling experiences have been at Ring of Honor shows. Another huge advantage to moving to Cincinnati is that for several years, Ring of Honor used to do regular shows at the Montgomery County Fairgrounds in Dayton, Ohio, just a little north from here. Unfortunately, that building no longer exists, and they no longer come there. But for a number of years, I saw some just unbelievably awesome shows from 2007 onward. I got to see guys there like Bryan Danielson, a.k.a. Daniel Bryan, Tyler Black, who's Seth Rollins, Chris Hero and Claudio Castagnoli, who's Cesaro, Nigel McGuinness, one of my favorite Ring of Honor World Champions ever, Samoa Joe. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on of top tier guys. Sarah Del Rey, who is responsible for training a lot of the women that are coming through NXT into WWE now. Just kind of a proverbial who's who, easy for me to say. Who's who in professional wrestling came through Ring of Honor at that point in time, and that intimacy and the interaction with the fans and the casual nature of it all. You're right. I mean, it's an experience like none other. That's cool that you got to experience that firsthand, man. That Ring of Honor keeps plugging away. They're very much the little engine that could. Ring of Honor and TNA both started in 2002, and Ring of Honor has consistently moved forward. They've grown over years. They're definitely in larger buildings now than they used to be. Obviously, TNA has had a lot of issues over the years, and in their current incarnation as Impact Wrestling, obviously, I hope they continue to grow and flourish. But Ring of Honor has been not just a consistent company, but been a company that really has, changed the game, because so many people that are headliners for WWE right now. I would be remiss if I didn't mention seeing Kevin Steen or Kevin Owens many a Ring of Honor show as well,
Yeah,
including
Kevin.
his old partner El Generico. Who, to see all these guys now headline for WWE, I mean, that WWE basically adopted a lot of Ring of Honor style in the same way that they adopted kind of ECW's attitude with the Attitude Era back in the 90s.
Yeah, definitely. Ring of Honor has flourished. Yeah, there's a lot of talent that's on the main roster in WWE. Like, for instance, like Kevin Steen, who's Kevin Owens, and of course, I mean, El Generico, you mentioned, Sami Zayn, and just Samoa Joe, Daniel Bryan. I mean, so much talent. AJ Styles, and just so much talent.
Punk, can't leave Punk out of that equation. I mean, again, one of the greatest Ring of Honor champions in history.
Cole Cabana, you can't forget about him either, man.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, very true. Very true.
You can't forget about these guys.
One of the most entertaining. You can't watch Cole Cabana perform and not be entertained. It's literally impossible.
Exactly.
The man is nothing but fun and entertainment from bell to bell. No question about it.
Yeah, you definitely. I mean, I love CM Punk, man, because it just his with him, the transformation and everything that he went through and stuff with his character and how he evolved it and stuff. But one thing is he stayed true to himself, and one of the best promos, that he could cut a promo on the mic, I'd have to say it with CM Punk, Paul Heyman, Jim Cornette, would be my top three. What would be your top three for who can cut a promo? Oh yeah, let me throw in there the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes there, the son of a plumber. Who would be your top? Let's say your top four.
Top three promo. That's difficult. I mean, Roddy would definitely have to be in there.
Yeah.
Wow, that's difficult, man. It's hard to narrow it down to a top three. I mean, Roddy, Flair, Dusty. I mean, Billy Graham was a great promo.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there's so many guys. I mean, Paul Heyman and Jim Cornette are both awesome promos.
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of great promo, man. I mean, The Rock is a great promo.
Oh yeah.
It's just, I mean, Hogan always had the ability to draw the emotion from the fans. I mean, Stone Cold had his own way as well. I mean, there's a lot of great promo, man. But if I was to go with a top three, it would probably be probably Piper, Flair, and Dusty. I'd say for me personally.
Yeah. I definitely agree with Dusty Rhodes there. He was my father's favorite. Dusty was, and he hated Flair. He cussed Flair. I remember times growing up as a kid, man, him yelling at the TV. He's like, a freaking damn Flair, just going crazy. He about to break her TV set, man. I mean, he probably did break a TV set. We probably went through some TV sets, if I can remember, before I was born, because of Flair. But other than that, yeah, those I definitely agree with that right there. What would you say would be? We'll throw another top three out there. Top three worst gimmicks you've seen.
Oh gosh, wow.
There's a lot. There's a lot out there. I know.
I got a buddy of mine named Steve. Actually, he's a mutual friend of mine and Robin's. He lives in Pittsburgh, and he'll send me bad gimmicks, bad characters all the time, which is hysterical to me that he does it. As far as worst gimmicks, wow, I obviously I'd have to say Gobbledygooker. Which I believe was Hector Guerrero that they had dressed up in there. Hector Guerrero, amazing talent.
Yeah.
Hector and Mondo Guerrero are the two Guerreros that don't get a lot of attention. Both of them were fantastic.
Yeah.
Obviously, Chavo Sr., Eddie, Chavo Jr., I mean, obviously the father, Corey Guerrero, were all fantastic performers, but Mondo and Hector were both awesome too. So Gobbledygooker, Fred Ottman, who was Tugboat and Typhoon, obviously got stuck with that god-awful Shockmaster gimmick, and God love him for making the best of that and making some money off that years later. But what a horrible gimmick for him. I mean, he was a big, strong dude who really was over at one point, both as Hogan's buddy, as Tugboat, and then he and Earthquake, John Tenta as the Natural Disasters were definitely a wrecking machine of a tag team. But for him to wear that glittery Stormtrooper helmet, just so horrible. So I'd say Shockmaster. And then number 3, oh boy. I'd probably have to say Red Rooster.
Oh, Red Rooster, Terry Taylor.
Because Terry Taylor was a solid in-ring worker. I agree. From stuff that I've read, I believe that originally the Mr. Perfect character was potentially going to first go to Terry Taylor, but they decided to go with Kurt Hennig instead. But I think Terry he was a good worker. He wasn't bad on the mic, but he just needed a little oomph. A little something, and but the Red Rooster was definitely not. It was not it.
No.
But it was a shame to kind of see, what could have been. He's a guy that I started watching early on. One of my favorite promotions was Bill Watts' old Universal Wrestling Federation. It's the first place I saw Watts. Sting, Rick Steiner, and Terry Taylor were all there. And just the guy had a lot of potential, and just that character. And I mean, they had him in a feud with Steve Lombardi, the Brooklyn Brawler. I mean, if that doesn't say kind of what the company thinks of you, I don't know what does. Because nothing against Steve Lombardi, but he was an enhancement guy. So if your major feud is with an enhancement guy, I mean, that's not exactly the best spot to be in.
Funny, since you brought up the Brooklyn Brawler. Well, I have to bring this up in 2015 when we were up in New York, me and my wife, there for SummerSlam. The package, she got this package deal where we go to SummerSlam, we got floor seats, we got to keep the chairs, which I have one sitting next to me right now.
Nice.
And we got to do that morning before the pay-per-view, we got to do a meet and greet with a couple of superstars. And then we got to go to Monday Night Raw afterwards. So it was a whole package deal thing. We basically blew our income tax that year to go to New York in there and everything. And well, the funny thing is, since you brought up the Steve Lombardi, the Brooklyn Brawler, what happened was that morning when we went to the meet and greet, we had to, we got there and we had to show who we were. We were on the list and everything, and we went in there to sit down. There was like a bunch of people in there. I mean, there's a lot of people in there sitting in there waiting anxiously to see who we were going to do a meet and greet with there. We had some coffee, ate some breakfast there. And they gave us food, which was great. We're sitting there. So me and my wife, we picked a table. So we're sitting there, and not to sound mean or anything, but there was a couple people there that was like, you could tell they were like hardcore WWE fans. One guy had a big scrapbook of autographs he brought, in even pages with pictures of people he's not met yet that he's gonna have sign. I'm like, damn.
Okay.
And then someone to break the ice and the tension at the table. This was great. Someone mentioned, we're all quiet looking at each other, and we're kind of like, yeah, okay, yeah. And then someone said, I wonder who we're going to meet. I'm looking over at the where I could see the WWE officials and stuff like that getting ready to set up for whoever's coming in. And, someone said, I wonder who you're going to meet. And I kind of looked over. I said, we're in New York. Wouldn't be my surprise. It's the Brooklyn Brawler. And the whole table just started laughing. And everyone just started laughing. And everyone's like, oh, man. It's like, yeah, I met the Brooklyn Brawler once. Yeah, he's pretty cool. Yeah, I met him before. I said, hell, I wouldn't mind meeting him, man. I was like, I don't care. As long as I get to meet someone, take a picture, autograph, I'm happy, man. I'm just happy to be here and just just to be enjoying this weekend here. And yeah, that was a good icebreaker there because it broke the tension and we all started cutting up and just having a good time talking and everything.
That's awesome, man.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to ask, who eventually came out?
It was Seth Rollins, who at the time was the current WWE champion, and the current Divas champion, Paige.
That's a pretty good meet and greet, man.
It was good.
You got a pretty good deal there.
Oh yeah, I did, and I shared the pictures on my Twitter. I went up and met Paige. I was like, "Hello," briefly got to talk with her. I mean, briefly. I'm talking about briefly. They had this one lady there. It was like, "Come on, go." It's like trying to run us off. It's like, take a picture, go next. Take a picture, go next. I'm like, damn, man. It's like you couldn't even enjoy it. And
yeah, any time you're dealing with WWE talent, a lot of the time that's what happens because and again I understand because there's just such a massive amount of people, but from a standpoint of wanting to actually have a moment to at least say something to somebody or have some kind of a moment, it kind of stinks. But I'm sorry, go ahead, man.
Yeah, so it did kind of stink. It did kind of go a little bit sour there for the fact that they were rushing us through there and stuff. My wife didn't even get to take a picture. She took the pictures, and I'm like, okay, here you go. And they're like, all right, next. And it's like, damn. And it was supposed to be an hour. They got everyone in and out of there within 30 minutes. But I did get to say hi to Paige and say, can I take a picture with you? Yeah, sure. Took a picture. I said, it's nice to meet you. She said, nice to meet you too. I was like, cool. I walked up to Rollins. I'm like, he was playing that, he was, bad there at the time, heel, trying to, play it off. And I'm like, hey, what's up, Rollins? And then I was like, we're taking a picture. And he's like, huh? And looks up and kind of smiled or kind of looked at the camera like, huh. So we took the picture. I'm like, good luck tonight, man, against Cena, getting that U.S. title. And then I walked off, and that was it. They've rushed us out of there.
I got you.
But yeah, I enjoy, and it was fun while it lasted. Going in there, getting autographs, and just meeting though. But I wish it would have lasted longer because I went to New Japan's was it Game Changer came to Daytona here back around June, and they did a thing with New Japan Wrestling. They had video game tournament and wrestling right here on the beach side, and they got to go up and meet the Gorillas of Destiny there, and got to briefly talk with them, which was fantastic. And it was a free meet and greet. They're sitting there, people lined up, just going take pictures, BSing, and they're like, it was just awesome. But what's funny is Bobby Fish, he was still injured at the time, and he was sitting there talking to I forget his name. There's so many members of the Bullet Club that's in Bullet Club that a lot of people don't even know about. I can't even think of his name, but he was sitting there talking with Bobby Fish, and one of the guys I was sitting with, we went down to go to the concession stand, and he seen Bobby. He's like, that's Bobby Fish. I'm like, yeah. And he's like, you won't mind taking a picture with my camera, I was like, nah, man, go ahead. So we're sitting there waiting while he was talking. All it took, David, was one mark. One mark. Okay, this really made me hate wrestling marks, the term mark. This was one guy walked by. He looked, saw Bobby. He kept walking, and in my mind, I'm like, keep walking, keep walking. He stopped, took a double take. Oh, hey, it's Bobby Fish. Damn, here comes everybody. Right there.
Oh, boy.
I was like, I was cussing. The guy's like, man. I said, I know. It takes one freaking mark, man. One freaking mark. And the guy walked by. I'm like, yeah, thanks. Thanks, appreciate it. And he's like, yeah, no problem. And he kept walking. I'm like, jackass. I was like,
well,
damn.
Everett, to be, that term mark, just to be fair and to be honest, honestly, we're all marks.
Yeah, we are.
We're all marks for the business. Otherwise, we wouldn't do what we do. We wouldn't so passionately be, speak about it and be involved with it and the whole nine. But I understand that being a tad bit frustrating. Some
it was
are a
frustrating.
little more enthusiastic than others. So we'll put it that way. But but no, that doesn't. Bobby Fish. as well as Dalton Castle,
Uh-huh.
are both from the same basic area of New York that I'm from.
Oh, yeah.
So it's actually pretty awesome to see both of those guys doing so well. Dalton Castle in particular took a route, I don't really want to say similar to mine because he's been far more successful than me and everything, but he's another guy who did radio in New York and wrestled at the same time, and it just kind of grew from there. And then of course his whole attraction, the whole character was enough to get into the Ring of Honor World Title, which is pretty cool. But Bobby Fish is a hell of a talented performer. He also did some MMA back in New York at one point as well. So he's a pretty skilled overall guy. Sometimes a lot of these cats you don't realize they're as athletically talented as they are, or to be completely straightforward, that they're far more skilled and dangerous than perhaps they appear on TV. Bobby Fish doesn't look like a giant guy, but I would dare say if you were to have an issue with him outside the ring, he could probably take care of business.
Oh, yeah. I was surprised, actually, David, how big he was in person. And the fact that when he was sitting there just having a conversation and stuff with, it's going to kill me. I'm going to remember it after the podcast today.
Let me ask you, what the guy he was talking to, was he of Japanese descent, or was he a Gaijin, an American?
American. He had he's part of the Bullet Club. I believe he's one of the newest members. Was
it Chase Owens?
Yes, that's it. Yes, Chase Owens.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so Chase Owens. Mm-hmm. Chase Owens, a good guy. He was trained by Ricky Morton from the Rock and Roll Express.
Oh, no way!
And with my journey continuing in pro wrestling, I actually restarted training in September. But before I got to regular training, I attended a seminar back in June or July of this year, and it was a Ricky Morton seminar, and Chase Owens was also a part of it. And I hadn't been in a ring in a long time, and one of the first things that I did was run a very simple spot with Chase Owens. And part of me was definitely geeking out that I was in the ring doing something with Chase Owens, a pretty damn skilled performer, period, but also a member of the Bullet Club, which is pretty damn nice.
Yes.
Unfortunately, after getting back into wrestling training, about 3 weeks into it, I suffered a torn bicep, which I'm currently recovering from, but them's the breaks. But I haven't given up. But go ahead, and I'm sorry.
It was Chase Owens. Thank you for that, because it would have killed me like all day today. I'm like, who the hell was it? I was talking. I was like, okay, Chase Owens. I would have Googled everybody that was in past, present, and future, just exaggerating there, of who's in the Bullet Club, just to find a name and just a picture. But Chase was fantastic. He had a fantastic match, and what the match I really loved and enjoyed was the Guerrillas of Destiny's tag team match they had against it was Fit Finley's son, David Finley, and I'm forgetting who else his tag team partner was. I want to have to look this
He
back
was
up.
tagging there for a while with Juice Robinson.
Yes.
I forget what was his name in NXT. Was it C.J. Parker or C.J. Graham or something?
Yeah,
I forget, but it's Juice Robinson now.
Yeah, it was C.J. Parker. Yeah, it was Juice Robinson. Yeah, thank you. So during that tag team match was freaking great. Was the Guerrillas of Destiny? They broke up, and one of them took I think it was Tama took Finley up into the crowd, right where we were sitting at. We're sitting probably about 5 or 6 rows up, and they came up there and they're sitting there fighting and stuff, and people's all getting excited and stuff. The camera's on them, and then down CJ's fighting with the other one, and it's just they're separated chaos. It was fantastic, David. Now, what was funny was David got beat down, and he's sitting there hanging there on the steps there, going down the where the bleachers were. Well, the other member took off and went to help out because CJ started getting the upper hand. So David kind of staggered, got up, and he was selling it, coming down the steps. Everyone's like, woo, yelling and everything and stuff. I stand up, and out of nowhere, it just hit me, and I just said this. I said, his name is Finley, and he loves to fight. He turns around and kind of gives you this look like, what? And everyone around me starts laughing and stuff. And,
oh my gosh!
And a lot of people was like, "Oh yeah," he's like, "I forgot about that." And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, it just dawned on me because, it was like Fit Finley. I just thought of his father, and because remember his gimmick was there for a while on SmackDown when he was running around with Hornswoggle.
Oh yes, of course. Yep.
Yeah. My name is Finley, and I love to fight. And one of my favorites right there, Fit Finley. He's such a skilled technician in the ring and stuff. And it's great what he's doing.
Fit Finley's, he makes everything look crisp and snug. Yeah. I mean, talk about people that you wouldn't want to mess with outside of the ring. I mean, that's definitely a guy. And, speaking about guys who are legit tough guys, when I was at StarCast in Chicago, I was able to meet, as you were there, the Gorillas of Destiny, and their dad Haku was there.
Yes.
And man, Haku's another guy, just a legit badass. But yeah, Finley is awesome, man. I mean, the matches he had with Steven Regal, or William Regal, as people know him now, back in the WCW days, were just brutal, badass matches for sure.
Oh yeah, they were such great matches, and I love the old WCW wrestling because it is it was great, man. I kept up with the Monday Night Wars with WWF and WCW, and of course I'd watch the first hour of Nitro, and then have the VCR recording it in another room and flip over 9 o'clock for Raw is War and watch that till 11, and then go back and catch up on the last 2 hours I missed on Nitro. Or the next day, I would sit there and get up early and watch the last 2 hours of what I missed. And it was the Monday Night Wars was a fantastic time. I mean, so many characters and so many, such great talent and stuff came out of the Monday Night Wars. And WCW, I loved the content they had on, especially with the cruiserweights, man. You had Jericho, you had Dean Malenko, the man of 1,000 holds, and Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio, Psychosis, La Parka, just name a few that I remember and stuff. And of course, Jericho stuck out the most for me back in the WCW days. I mean, his feud with Dean Malenko, he was the man of 1,001 holds.
Oh yes, I remember he had the list that he would read them all off from, and of course he had Ralph Fitz with him, his bodyguard, who wore the little half shirt. It was hysterical, man. Jericho showed, I've seen. This past year, I've seen Fozzy play twice live.
Yeah,
and Jericho is such an awesome entertainer. Period. Not just in pro wrestling, but just overall, he's an awesome entertainer. But back in those WCW days, the world was just starting to get a glimpse of exactly what that guy had to offer. And I mean, he's outstanding. There's so much that so many guys out there, guys and gals, can learn from studying him. Just an amazing talent. But yeah, the Monday Night Wars was an exciting time to be a wrestling fan. It was a lot of fun. There's parts of it that I wish didn't take place. There were a lot of great stories and rivalries that were kind of hot-shotted and were, too much was put on fast forward. unfortunately, because of lifestyles and the risks that guys and gals took, there's a lot of folks that are no longer with us as a direct result of that time frame. But just being a fan watching, it was amazing to have the, two huge wrestling companies have, major shows on every Monday night.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that hopefully perhaps one day there'll be another company that'll be able to have and provide some level of competition to WWE. I mean, at this point, the closest that we have is New Japan Pro Wrestling, and even they are, light years behind, the stranglehold that WWE has on the wrestling industry. But hopefully one day there'll be strong competition, whether it be from New Japan continuing to evolve or another company coming along. And, that's really when wrestling is good. When there's competition, when there's different places for people to go and work, to keep themselves fresh on TV, and just from a creative standpoint, it keeps, the heads of companies on their toes and makes them want to be creative. I mean, one of the biggest issues right now with WWE is that, since there is no competition, a lot of times they coast. For people that sit and watch all 3 hours of Monday Night Raw, you have far more patience than I have, because I cannot sit through that 3-hour mess of a program, because a lot of times it's just repetitive, a lot of coasting, and I'm not really knocking any of the performers. This is just, it's the direction of the show. It's, people are doing what they're asked to do, but hopefully one day we have some competition again, and we can get back to a little bit of that excitement that we all felt back during that period when Raw and Nitro went head-to-head.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I miss. I miss, that competition right there and stuff, and just the promotions, just going head-to-head every Monday night. I mean, like we talked about earlier, there's so many other options out there nowadays with Impact Wrestling, our Ring of Honor, and of course, I feel that a lot of people has actually looked around where they live and look at the local wrestling around there. Now, one of the things I want to ask you is, in your area, right around there in Cincinnati, you're involved with Battle on the Borders, which is a promotion that I hear that Robin, I mean, he talks about and he promotes, which I think is fantastic. Promoting your local wrestling promotion that's around you. How did you get involved with a Battle on the Borders and your relationship with your local promotions where you live? Well, I mean, there are Ohio has quite a few independent wrestling promotions all throughout the state. Battle on the Border is a really great organization that bases shows out of Harrison, Ohio. And I've photographed events for them previously. Robin works more directly with them at this point as far as doing podcast interviews and some of their social media. I know he handles their Twitter account at this point. But Denham, who runs Battle on the Border, I mean, good guy. It's a really solid promotion. We were just talking about Chase Owens from the Bullet Club a little earlier. He'll actually be wrestling Brian Pillman Jr. At a show, I believe it's December 22nd in Harrison. If anybody's interested, you can go on Facebook and look up Battle on the Border Wrestling, and that'll give you the details. But Battle on the Border is a great local group. They usually bring in name talent. A gentleman named Johnny Knockout is their champion, who is a really skilled, pretty chaotic performer, very interesting guy, really good promo, has a good look. Has done some stuff with WWE in the past, and he's definitely a solid champion. Before him, Rob Conway
was their champion, who is a former WWE tag team champion as well as a former NWA world champion. So pretty credible guys have held their title. But there's Battle of the Board Wrestling, but there's also a ton of other promotions. I mean, I've worked for, probably my, if I would consider any company my home, it would be New Ohio Wrestling, which is based out of the Columbus, Ohio area. Right. They've actually got a big show coming up this Saturday, November 10th, at Kickmaster Foot Golf. They're the first wrestling company outside the WWE that's ever had any kind of a presence during the Arnold Sports and Fitness Expo weekend that they do in Columbus every year at the end of February, early March, which if anyone out there is familiar with this, I mean, it's a huge, huge event that draws several 100,000 people every year. So, So New Ohio Wrestling is the first independent promotion outside of WWE that's had any involvement with them. And they did matches there, a big tournament this earlier this year. They'll be returning next year. So anyone that comes out to the show this Saturday at Kickmaster Foot Golf, just outside of Columbus, Ohio, for every ticket they purchase, they will actually get a free ticket to go to the Arnold Expo in 2019 to see New Ohio Wrestling again, as well as enjoy the other activities that will be going on there. So you could go on Facebook again and check out New Ohio Wrestling. Donnie Hoover is the promoter there, great guy, one of the most honest, if not the most honest promoter I've ever worked with. Not that Denham isn't from Battle on the Border, he definitely is too, but Donnie is an awesome guy, and definitely that company deserves to be seen. But there's also, of course, Rockstar Pro Wrestling in Dayton. I've done photography for them in the past. War Wrestling in Lima, which Big Tom runs over there. I've worked with them previously. There's Remix Pro Wrestling in Marietta. Earlier this year, I photographed an event there that featured Pentagon Jr. and his brother Ray Phoenix, which was awesome since I was a huge fan of Lucha Underground. To see those guys perform ringside was fantastic. There's AIW up in Cleveland, which is tremendous promotion. But so there, and I'm leaving a lot out. Right here in our own backyard in Cincinnati, there's the NWF. Northern Wrestling Federation, ran by Roger Ruffin. Roger had a hand in training guys like Abyss and Chad Too Bad Allegra, which you probably would know as Carl Anderson from him and his tag team with Luke Gallows. What do they call them? Is it just Gallows and Anderson, or do they call them the Good Brothers, or what do they call them on WWE TV? I'm not quite sure.
I'm not sure what they call them. I think they call them Gallows and Anderson, or they nickname the Good Brothers, or I mean they were called the Club at one point.
That's right. So it's they didn't want to straight up call them the Bullet Club, but but obviously all of the diehard wrestling fans know that those guys, especially Carl Anderson. Carl Anderson, that's the reason why the damn thing was called the Bullet Club, is that it was a vehicle to get Finn Balor or Prince Devitt over at that point in time, and they wanted to come up with a name for the group, and it was kind of based off of Carl Anderson, because he was Machine Gun Carl Anderson. And I'm not sure if it was him or Finn or them jointly together, but that's kind of where the name and the whole deal was born, was from those guys.
Yeah, it definitely was. Because one day I sat there and I said, how the heck did the Bullet Club start? Because I read stuff about, like New Japan, it started there, and it started over in Ring of Honor. And then I was like, you know what? So I did the research and stuff, and I found out, it was started by Finn Balor and Carl Machine Gun Anderson. And it was when Balor turned heel. And when he turned heel, him and Anderson, they came up with the name for it. And look where it is today, man. Who would have thought that? How big.
Yeah, and a large part of that is the power of, Gato, who for a long time used to come out to the ring with Okada. Now he's kind of joined up with Switchblade Jay White and the the original members of the Bullet Club, like Tama Tonga and Bedlock Valet, et cetera, et cetera. But Gato's the one that really helped to drive the Bullet Club idea. And then, after Finn left, they brought in AJ Styles, which just further enhanced the group. And then, of course, when AJ left, they brought Kenny Omega into it. So it's just been, one top tier guy after another. And of course, once Omega and the Bucks were on the same page, and then they brought in, Cody Rhodes, et cetera, then it just really blew up from that. And, originally that was a lot of Gato, and then, of course, as time has gone on, the Elite has done, obviously, a tremendous job of getting themselves over to the point where they were able to fill, an 11,000+ seat arena in Chicago with fans of their YouTube show and fans of the Bullet Club overall.
Mm-hmm. I know that's amazing. That is amazing, and I mean just how far they've come, and how far the Bullet Club's come, and how far, just all the way from like the from starting with Balor and Anderson and getting to where it is today. It's amazing just to see that and actually go and look at the history with the organization and stuff. And like with Bullet Club is basically kind of taking references from during the Attitude Era with like with DX and NWO, and it's just fantastic, and just where it's at and who comes in and who comes out and stuff, and how big it is. You got Bullet Club in ROH, you got Bullet Club in New Japan, and you basically, I still consider AJ, Balor, and Gallows and Anderson part of Bullet Club. So you got Bullet Club all over the place, man.
It's very true, man. The interesting thing about the growth and the evolution of that idea is because the original NWO and WCW, I mean, Bischoff got that idea from New Japan.
Right.
The whole idea of an outside faction invading, that whole idea was born from something that he saw in Japan. So he basically stole the idea from Japan, and now, New Japan takes it back with the Bullet Club and modernizes it. Mm-hmm. And, it's pretty amazing to see a non-WWE entity do so well, to the point where, you can buy their merchandise, at a Hot Topic store.
Yeah.
TNA at one point in the mid-2000s did have some merch that was available at Hot Topic, but it didn't do nearly as well as the, modern day, the Bullet Club stuff, the New Japan stuff, the Elite stuff. I honestly would have thought, and this is not a knock on anybody involved, but I would have thought that it would have fizzled out by now. But it continues to go on, which is pretty damn impressive as far as the staying power. And it also is a testament to the fact that that fans today are hungry for something different than WWE. Yeah. They want an alternative.
They do.
They want options and choices, and in any other entertainment genre there are endless numbers of options, so people that enjoy wrestling, they want the same thing. They want options.
They
want to have a choice rather than just being spoon-fed the same nonsense over and over. They want to have an option of where they spend their money. So it's pretty cool to see that, and certainly happy for all the guys and gals that have been able to benefit from that financially and business-wise during this particular boom in independent wrestling.
Yeah, I totally agree. I definitely totally agree. And going to wrestling events, independent wrestling events, and getting to meet your favorite independent wrestler, especially with a lot of events that pop up. I went to an event in this past July called That Wrestling Event, and I was privileged and happy to meet the great Jim Cornette. That was the only that was the reason why I went, for the fact that on his podcast, the Jim Cornette Experience, he said, I'm not doing a lot of appearances in 2018, and me being in Florida is the only time in 2018, or I don't know whenever I'll ever go back, I'll be there. So I said, I gotta go. So I went and I met Cornette. I got his picture. I got an autograph, which is hanging right behind me, and the action figure that I picked up that no one bought because he's standing right down 3 sections down in the flesh, and there's this action figure. I'm like, really? Let me have that action figure. So I bought it and went down there and asked him to sign it, and he signed it, and it's hanging up behind me. Now, I love the videos. This is where I'm going with this. I love the videos that you put together with the company that you own, Demoblast Studios. And I love the videos that you put out there, you and Robin, and especially the Jim Cornette. I laughed so hard, and my wife watched it with me. We laughed so hard together watching that I had to run to the restroom, man, because I was entertained. How now, going to Heroes and Legends, how was that, and how was it being able to speak with the talent that you and Robin got to speak with, especially Cornette, man? I mean, my hat's off to you.
Well, Heroes and Legends Wrestling, I've known the promoter there, Jason Maples, for some time. I actually went to the very first one that he did a number of years ago, and I've been to several since then. Right. The very first one that he held, the biggest attraction there was Bret Hart. So I'm a huge Bret Hart fan. So it was awesome to be able to meet Bret Hart. But I've done business with Jason before. I was a vendor guest at an event a year or so ago, and just advertising my company, Demoblast Studios. So Jason's a good guy, and those shows typically draw a lot of people. They're there to meet the stars, and so Robin and I had the opportunity to go in with the podcast, Wrestle Podcast, and have a table there, have a presence there, and we were allowed access to many of the talent. So we talked to. Going into it, I wasn't sure who we were going to have access to, but once you've done stuff and have been involved in pro wrestling, especially independent pro wrestling, then you kind of already know that nothing really goes according to plan. You got to be ready to kind of adjust and adapt to whatever the situation is. So that's what we did, and we actually ended up walking out of that with more interviews than I would have first anticipated. So that was very cool. But we got to talk to people like Francine, the Queen of Extreme from ECW, who was incredibly nice and took her time with us. Helped actually to promote the video on her Facebook page that we did, which I thought was very cool. Yeah. We talked to Madison Rain, who's had an amazing year in women's professional wrestling. Oh, yeah. Appearing at the Mae Young Classic, appearing at All In, being involved with Ring of Honor. Definitely, and again, genuinely nice person to speak with. We had time to speak with Brian Pillman Jr., who, we know from here in the local area. Recently, when I was promoting that particular interview and video, I posted a photo that I had done. Brian Pillman Jr. and I did a photo shoot very early in his career, pre-mullet, where I posted one of those photos, and you can kind of see some of the character just starting to come out. But it was nice to speak with him. We spoke with Oscar from Men on a Mission. Really funny, entertaining guy. That was a lot of fun. A gentleman named Benjamin Boone, The Bachelor, great independent star here in Ohio. He's actually involved in the wrestling training facility that I go to, the Ohio Pro Wrestling Academy, ran by an excellent trainer, James Avery, so it was cool to talk with him. But the two main interviews that really stand out to me. I would be best. We also interviewed Dan Severn, of course, former, obviously legend in mixed martial arts on the UFC.
Oh yeah.
Former NWA world champion. But the and D'Lo Brown. I'm remembering everybody as we're speaking here, Everett. But what I'm getting to is the two interviews that really stuck out to me that I was incredibly happy and excited we were able to do. One was with Road Warrior Animal, which it blew my mind that we got to speak with Animal. I honestly was very pleasantly surprised that he agreed to do the interview. And then number two was Jim. The number one, honestly, was Jim Cornette.
Yeah.
Jimmy was. I've met Jimmy on I believe it's 5 or 6 different occasions, and he's always been nice, always been great, always been funny. Mm-hmm. The interview that he did with us was off the charts, unbelievably entertaining.
It was.
There was another podcast that was there at the convention, and those guys did a nice job. And I didn't see the interview that they had done with Jimmy until several days after the event. But I mean, they did a nice job, and Jimmy was very nice to them. But when Jimmy spoke with myself and Robin, he just turned it up.
He did, man.
Just beyond to a whole other level. So it was. He just came out of the chute with both barrels blasting.
Yes.
It was. Classic Cornette to say the very least. Yeah. And I was able to. Obviously, Robin and I took a fair share of verbal abuse during the interview, but it was the most fun I've had with somebody just ripping me to shreds ever. But I also got to ask him about again, I mentioned him earlier, my good friend Bobby Blaze Smedley, who worked for Jimmy for a number of years. Jim was very kind, had some very nice things to say about Bobby, so that was very cool, and I was able to get that in the interview. But yeah, that was a fantastic interview. I certainly, anybody out there that has not watched that, if you're a big Jim Cornette fan, if you're a fan of Wrestle Podcast and what Robin's doing, definitely check out that video. It's over on my YouTube channel, Demoblast Studios. Just a lot of fun. And then, of course, we got to do the interview with Road Warrior Animal.
Yeah.
Growing up, again, I mentioned it earlier in our talk here today, Everett, following wrestling through the magazines originally and really seeing, the Road Warriors on the cover of a wrestling magazine and just instantly being drawn to that. And just their look alone was enough to be like, wow, who are these guys? They just jumped off the page. So I'm a huge fan of the Road Warriors, as well as their manager, Paul Ellering. And Paul Ellering is somebody that I, in my own pursuit of getting into pro wrestling from a performer standpoint, I'm looking at this point to be more of a manager who may occasionally wrestle. And Paul Ellering is one of my strongest influences. Probably Paul Ellering and Gary Hart are my two biggest managerial influences. But being able to speak with Animal was incredibly cool. Robin and I, when we went to the NWA 70th anniversary show, Animal made the big announcement that they're bringing back the Crockett Cup in 2019, which is huge for old school pro wrestling fans and big for tag team wrestling as a whole. But yeah, both of those interviews, man, were just outstanding. But that corny interview,
that was great. That was great, man. He ripped you.
It has to be seen to be believed.
Yeah, he ripped you, man. I mean, he said you look like you just walked off a cake there. You just came off a cake, and he said you look better than this guy right over here. It was just classic Cornette, man. I mean,
for sure, man. He tore Robin and I up, but it was in good fun. And Corny sometimes gets a bad rap. He is an extremely opinionated guy. There's no doubt about it. But and he's very passionate. That's to say the very least. But he loves pro wrestling. He is a pro wrestling historian, and he's just a good dude, man. He really is a good guy. I'm sure you got that sense when you met him. He, a lot of people that have not met him can easily pass judgment. But if you actually met the guy, I think your opinion might change because Jimmy Cornette actually is a really good dude. And if you're a pro wrestling fan, ultimately you probably will like, if not agree with, quite a few things that Jimmy says a lot of the time as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, definitely. Cornette is the kind of guy that speaks his mind. You're gonna love him or you're gonna hate him. You know, you're gonna fire back at him, but you fire back at him because you don't like what he says. He's coming to come at you, and when he does, it's hellfire and brimstone. That's just who Cornette is. That's who he is. Now, you were being there doing the Heroes and Legends with Rob and Wrestle Podcast and stuff, and the videos and everything's up on your YouTube channel for Demoblast Studios. How did you come up and create Demoblast Studios? Can you tell me about that?
Absolutely. I mean, it's essentially a creative hub for me where, I wanted to have a place where, the different things that I enjoyed doing, that I would have a centralized home for everything, where I could post, podcast interviews or my artwork or, social media videos or photography or, anything along those lines. It's an idea that I had several years ago. It took a while to get it to where it is now. I mean, long before I started photographing any events, that the website existed for just basic things, for artwork, for podcasts, for some videos, and it's definitely grown and matured over years. The whole concept again is just to be one centralized location where people can go to get caught up in exactly what I've done. If I'm looking to do work for somebody, that's a place that they can go to see samples of what I can do. For fans, it's a place where you can view different video content that I've created for different organizations or different performers. You can see photographs from all kinds of events. And I've still got a backlog of events that I photographed throughout the year that I still have to put up on the website. Because it does take a while once you photographed an event and you've got 5,000 to 10,000 photos that you have to mull through and find the best of the best and edit and categorize and get them out there so that people can actually enjoy them. But ultimately, it's designed to showcase those, and it's also a means to help promote individual talents and companies out there. Whenever I post stuff online, I try to make mention of the different companies I work for. I try to make sure that they get just as much credit, if not more so than I do, for the content that I put out, because I want them to benefit as well. The whole idea is that, we are all here and participating because we love pro wrestling, and we want to see pro wrestling continue to grow, especially independent pro wrestling. And a lot of times the guys and gals involved on a grassroots level, on that independent level, many of the time, they're lucky if a photographer is even available to take photos.
Yeah.
A lot of times, if you follow different people, they're posting stuff that fans have taken in the stands, because a lot of times, and I certainly understand it, but a lot of times when it comes down to promoters, they've got so many other things to pay for that one of the last things that any promoter wants to pay for is to have a photographer ringside photograph an event. So a lot of times photographers are either bartering their time or they're working at a reduced rate or whatever the case may be. And a lot of times there's no photographer at all because the promoter, their money's tied up in X, Y, and Z. But having a good photographer or solid videography, or I generate videos to help promote different events or different individuals. I mean, those things are helpful as well because, again, for social media purposes, there are so many things that draw the audience's attention that You need to put out more, and I'm speaking, from a promoter and from a wrestler standpoint. Wrestlers can't
Right.
just put out photos of themselves at the gym every day and expect people to care.
Yeah.
And a promoter just can't put out a picture of the show poster every now and again and expect people to care.
Right.
You've got to have varied content. You've got to have different types of photos, action photography. You've got to have video content. You've got to have interesting promos. You've got to have stuff that's outside the box. And that's really where, Demoblast Studios comes into play, because it's all about thinking outside the box. There are a number of talented photographers out there, but I still to this date don't feel that a lot of them do the things that I do with Demoblast Studios. They don't create the video content. They don't utilize editing in the same fashion that I do. That's not to take anything away from the folks that are working in the business, because there are, again, a lot of very talented photographers that work in pro wrestling. As a matter of fact, if we're speaking about Florida in particular, since that's where originally you're from, I forget his shoot name, but his work name is Speedy. So Speedy does some amazing wrestling photography based out of Florida. I would say he's probably the best of the best right now. And he's a guy that does stuff out of the box. He does create video content. He's in many ways the standard bearer as far as that's concerned. So the stuff that I do is different than Speedy, but just to make sure that I'm giving proper credit. That's definitely a guy who does extremely well. There's a local photographer here. Her name's Valerie. Her gimmick name is Mischievous Panda Photography. I've worked alongside her before. Really nice gal. She does really good work. Another great photographer that does wrestling in the area. I'm just mentioning a few. I don't want to go through a litany of a bunch of different folks, but there's a lot of talented individuals. But for everything that I do, I feel like I bring a lot more variety to the table. I feel like I'm able to create more diversified content. A lot of these folks are not involved in things like video production. They're not involved in podcasting. They're not involved in that type of endeavor artistically. So that's really what separates Demoblast Studios apart from the majority out there. But at the heart of it all, it's a true lifelong love and passion for pro wrestling, and ultimately wanting to have a vehicle to help promote pro wrestling even further.
That's fantastic. I love it. I love everything that you've done with Demoblast Studios and with promoting wrestling and promoting, helping promote, and it shows in the passion and it shows in your work. It's fantastic, and I definitely do love that and love what you do and appreciate what you do and stuff. I thought it was pretty neat.
I appreciate you saying that, man.
Yeah, you're welcome. No problem. I like the fact that you threw up on Instagram the picture that the poster I made, the one I used to crop you out on, and you had that little effect to it. I thought that was pretty neat, man. I was like, how the hell did he do that? That was fantastic. I love that. I definitely love that.
It's little stuff like that makes a post stand out from the rest.
Oh yeah,
you'd be amazed at how much more something will be seen just by adding a slight animation or effect. Because I love Instagram. Instagram by far is my favorite social media platform. And I think that most photographers would say the exact same thing, because it's a visual platform. It's all about the images that are posted. So for me personally, I love Instagram, and I continue to try to evolve what I'm doing on there from a content standpoint. So the adding, effects and animations, things along those lines, just help to make things more, visibly appealing. So,
Yes.
the whole thing is that, I wanted to make sure that people were aware that I was going to be on your program, Everett, and I wanted to help
Yes.
promote the show. You were kind enough to reach out to me and ask me to be on the show, and in return, I would feel like I would be doing you a disservice if I did at least try to get word out about the program, not just for my appearance here today, but hopefully to get people to tune in moving forward, to enjoy, the vast content that you provide and that other creators provide on the Podcast City Network overall.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Appreciate the fact that you able to take time out today and come on here, and I appreciate everything that you do with Demoblast Studios. And I want to give a shout out to the viewers viewing the on the Podcast City Network Twitch channel right now. Those tuning in, jumping in and out, and viewing this today, that you must check out what David Stockwell does with Demoblast Studios. And I'm going to ask you here just in a couple minutes, here before we wrap up. I know I'm glad that we've, especially you, taking the time out today to talk. And I know I said like an hour, and this kind of went on about 2 hours though. But this has been so great,
It's all good, man.
Oh, I mean, we could probably go 4 hours, but I'm not going to push it. But
no, you know what, Everett, that really shows. I mean, ultimately, you invited me on to talk
Yes.
about my company, but we also agreed that obviously we were going to talk about wrestling.
we did.
Again, we're here because we love pro wrestling. I mean, and then that's it. I mean, you can call us marks, you can call us fans, you can call us whatever, but everybody that's involved with wrestling, whether it be
Yes.
the folks in the ring, the folks that are behind the scenes putting the shows together, the fans in the stands, regardless, we're all marks, we're all fans. We all love this amazing art form called pro wrestling. So that's lent itself to a 2+ hour talk. And,
Yes.
Again, Everett, I certainly appreciate you having me on the program. Today I'm working on putting together a social media video ad for my good friend Jerome, who runs a vintage toy store in the Cincinnati area called House of Plastic.
Nice.
I'll give him a quick plug here. He's located just off of Beachmont Ave here in Cincinnati. So as soon as I'm done speaking with you here today, Everett, I'm going to get back to working on that ad. He's a good dude. There's a lot of wrestling content he has. And hopefully by Thursday, I'll be posting on social media that particular video where folks can take a look and see some of the awesome wrestling collectibles that Jerome has available at House of Plastic. If you want to know more about that particular location and store, if you're into vintage toys, because he's got a lot more than just wrestling, you can hit him up on Facebook at House of Plastic. But please, Everett, go right ahead.
I do want to say thank you for coming on today and chatting with me and discussing wrestling and Demoblast Studios. Where can people find more of Demoblast Studios and yourself on social media?
Pretty much everything is under the name Demoblast Studios. So the website, which I do need to update, I'm much more consistent on social media than I'm on the website, I have to admit. But the website is still a great place to go. I'll be actually making some updates to the website later this week. But the website itself is simply demoblaststudios.com. In addition, I'm available on Facebook. I'm on Instagram as well as Twitter. They're all Demoblast Studios. Twitter, I'm not on there a ton, but I do update from time to time. Instagram, I'm the most consistent with because I do love that platform. And Facebook, I'm on there pretty frequently too. So, but if you need to reach out, you can certainly reach out to me through one of those social media outlets, or you can always drop me an email, which would be the email address is demoblaststudios@rocketmail.com. If you have any questions, if there's anything that you would like assistance with, certainly I can attempt to answer your question, or I may be able to help. I can certainly provide pricing, et cetera, on anything that you may want to have done, whether it be creating social media video content for you or your brand, photo shoots, anything along those lines. You can certainly hit me up. Again, the website, demoblaststudios.com.
I want to thank everyone that tuned in today on the live stream and listen to the podcast. You could find more Everett Lee Show on the social media content right there you see on the screen there, ladies and gentlemen. You can hit Everett Lee up on Facebook, The Everett Lee Show. Click that thumbs up. And, of course, on Twitter, at the Everett_Lee. And, of course, cannot forget Podcast City Network. If you head over to podcastcity.net, you can hit them up on Facebook, Podcast City Network. Hit the thumbs up there. And, of course, on Twitter, at Podcast City Net. And that is it right there, ladies and gentlemen, for the Everett Lee Show. I want to give a shout out. Everyone, thank you for tuning in to the Everett Lee Show. And be sure to check more content out on Podcast City Network. I'm Everett Lee, signing off. Peace